Can I ask you a stupid question, Mr. Slide?
There are no stupid questions, just stupid people who ask questions.
First of all, I just want to tell you what a great show you got. I listen to you all the time.
Thank you. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, did I tell you guys I got a goat?
Oh, yeah. So there was a lot of that, and we built up empires. We stole countries. That's what you do. That's how you build an empire. We stole countries with the cunning use of flags. Yeah. Just sail around the world and stick a flag in. I claim India for Britain. And they go, you can't claim us, we live here. 500 million of us. Do you have a flag? We don't need a bloody flag. This is our country, you bastard. No flag, no country. You can't have one. That's the rules that I've just made up.
Little column A, little column B.
Yeah, baby.
Well, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever you do. A lot of things happening in the world today. Most of them are far beyond our control, you might say. So perhaps it's time we took a pause and thought about life, thought about the laws of gravity. Tanker War 2, Iran, the UK, the US, flags, politics, and or the news. Don't touch that dial. Just try to hear me out for a little while. Well, the Steno Impero sits in an Iranian port, having been seized by Iran. The UK is sending naval assets to the Gulf. The US is calling for action or talks. The world is holding its breath, but almost nobody is sure about exactly why are we doing this. What else is new? Am I right? Here's how you get a hold of me. The text machine is area code 209-565-DAVE. That's 209-565-3283. The email, dave@thedavebowmanshow.com. And of course, we're on the web. Just use your preferred non-denominational web search browser to take you to plausiblylive.com, or just look for The Dave Bowman Show on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes. Ego bibere capulas et olive verve. I drink coffee that others might live. Well, there's a lot of confusion about what's going on in the Gulf right now, the Persian Gulf, that is. Not the Mississippi Gulf or anywhere else. Whenever you say the Gulf, you pretty much are talking about the Persian Gulf because, let's face it, the mad mullahs of Teheran are problematic across the board. I mean, they just are. That's reality. But as we're watching what's going on in all this, you may be confused by what you're reading. You have no doubt heard or read or seen on the news that the Iranians have seized a British ship known as the Stena Impero. Now, you would be forgiven for understanding this to be a British ship because that's what they keep telling you. The Iranians have seized a British ship. So, okay. And, of course, this has resulted in just a whole lot of diplomatic brouhaha. The Brits are upset. The Americans are upset. Everybody's upset because no one knows what's going on. Why did the Iranians do this? And, of course, it's not the Iranians that did it. It's an Iranian paramilitary group, which, theoretically anyway, you could deny any culpability. The Iranian government could step back and go, well, we didn't do it. This paramilitary group did it, and they were not authorized to do it. And so, it wasn't us. And then there's the issue of whose ship is this? Quite frankly, you need to understand something about this ship. You really do. Okay? You need to understand that this ship is... Well, it was built by China, Communist China. It's owned by a Swedish company, licensed through a Crete-based LLC, operated by a Scottish-based operations company, and has a crew of roughly 30 people, not one of whom is a citizen of the UK. But you can be forgiven for misunderstanding that it's a British ship because that's what they keep telling you. It's a British ship that's been seized. Well, they're careful about what they say. They keep saying it's a British flagged ship, which has a different meaning if you understand what's being said. What is that? So what's that all about? And of course, this is problematic because there are people who want to go to war over this, and that's a problem. For centuries, since man has been going to sea and had flags, ships that went to sea carried flags of different countries. Now, okay, so a ship was built in country A, and it was owned by country A, and it served to country A, but it was not unusual for that ship then to sail with country B and country C and country D's flags aboard it because you could be sneaky that way. The ancient Romans discovered this very simply, that if you fly a different flag from a different country, they'll leave you alone. They don't know. I mean, there's no internet. They can't look up a ship and go, oh, that's not really Carthaginian. And so if they flew up a Carthaginian pennant and the Carthaginian navy was closing on them, they would go, oh, it's one of ours. We'll leave it alone. And they would sail off. And this was brilliant, right? It didn't take long before navies discovered, figured out that they could use that to their advantage in warfare. During the First World War especially, it actually happened during the Civil War quite extensively. The Confederates used this tactics with their raiders. They would fly flags, Britain, France, Holland, whatever, and then at the last second, as they were getting ready to attack ships, they would raise their Confederate flag, and ta-da, we're not really British, sorry. The Germans put this to great use during the First World War. This is the SMS Wolf, which was a merchant raider. And what they would do is they would disguise this ship as various other ships. They would run up a dummy funnel or a new mast or paint it a different color or write a different thing on the side of it. And, of course, fly a different country's flag. And ships that were at sea, it's not unusual for ships that are at sea to kind of pass close to one another because it's lonely out there. And, you know, maybe sometimes you just want to say hi or on rare occasions, exchange some greetings or some films or foodstuffs or whatever. And so this ship and others like it would sail up close to Allied shipping ships, and say hi. And then at the last second, they would drop their whatever flag they would be flying, run up their Imperial German flag, lower some disguise type stuff, run out their guns and go, ha-ha, we got you. Silly Allied ship, and they would either sink it or capture it or something like that. This went on in World War II, by the way. The Atlantis was a very successful merchant raider that did this during this. There's a great book by her captain that's really worth the read. The cruiser SMS Emden went almost around the world during the First World War doing this. It was a great tactic, and it was one that was invented, I guess, by us Americans in the modern sense. We started doing this during Prohibition. Now, we started doing this for different reasons during Prohibition, and this is what you really need to understand, is why does this Swedish-owned company have a Chinese-built tanker with a Crete LLC leasing it to a Scottish sub-company, operating company, with crews that aren't from anywhere near England, seized by Iran, and everybody's calling it a British ship. It's a British flag ship. Well, we started this. During Prohibition, it was illegal to drink, right? Couldn't get a drink in the United States, and so somebody hit on the idea that if you took a ship, a small ship, a boat, whatever you want to call it, and you stuck a different country's flag on it, well, then the United States laws don't apply. And then you could go on that ship and you could imbibe. And I'm not kidding. Of course, this didn't last long because people started realizing, well, you can't just put up a different flag. That's cheating. And so they hit upon an idea, a business idea, known as the flag of convenience. And what they would do is literally pay to register this ship in another country, specifically during the Prohibition era, Panama. They would do this in Panama, and they would, it would, for all practical purposes, be legally a Panamanian ship. Even though it was owned by an American, it would be registered legally in Panama. Some years ago, when I moved to California, I had a truck. I had a 1984 Chevy S10 truck that had no chance whatsoever of passing smog in California. It wasn't going to happen. So I needed to have the truck registered. I needed to have license plates and all that stuff on it, right? So for a couple of years, I kept it registered in Georgia as a flag of convenience. This is a very common business practice. If you have a credit card, dig out your credit card and look where the issuing bank is. It's unlikely that the issuing bank for that credit card is anywhere near where you actually live. It's probably in Delaware or North Dakota. Flag of convenience business practice. Why? Because it's easier to incorporate these things in those places than it is wherever you live. Some years ago, Nevada used to run ads all the time in California about, register your LLC here in Nevada. It's cheaper, and ta-da, you will get you'll get all kinds of advantages for doing so. You won't have to pay California business taxes. You won't have to do all these things. So this is not unusual. So we started doing this during the Prohibition era. We started registering our ships, particularly down in Panama. We really, as Americans during that era, we really liked Panama. There's another country that we really like too, and I'll get to that in just a second. But of all the countries in the world and all these various flags that fly above nations and ships and all that, there's a lot of possibilities here. And what you need to understand is that each one of these countries has different rules and different laws. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, if you register a ship in the United Kingdom under English law, not necessarily Scottish law, but under English law, that ship is eligible for what's called appropriation by the military during time of war. So, for example, the Queen Elizabeth, the great liners, the Cunard liners, during the Second World War and even during the First World War and even during the Falkland Islands War, were appropriated by the government because they're the UK flagged ships, and the UK technically then says, well, we can use these ships for our military purposes if we need to. The United States has similar rules. That's why so many, in fact, there are virtually no U.S. merchant flag ships. There are a couple, but not very many. And usually those are owned, and I'm doing the air quote thing here, by somebody like the Military Sea Lift Command or somebody closely associated with the United States Navy or the United States military. But as a general rule, most ships are flagged elsewhere. Why? Because, well, it works out better for the people that owns it. So, as it turns out, there are a number of countries in the world that offer this flag of convenience, as it were, for ships that don't want to register in their home countries. Okay, now stay with me here. I know this is getting confusing, but so you have all of these countries, and if you look at some of these countries, it's kind of interesting. Bolivia, which, okay, Panama kind of makes sense. Why would you register a ship in Panama? Well, there are certain charges for going through the Panama Canal. But if you're a Panamanian ship, you get a discount. So you register your ship in Panama. Mongolia is a flag of convenience. Bangladesh, Ceylon, North Korea offers pretty good discounts for flags of convenience. It's kind of amazing when you sit here in Cambodia, when you sit here and think about all these nations that offer all of these flags of convenience and the ability then to bypass your country's particular laws, particular requirements, particular costs that are involved. Now think about this for just a moment. The Steno Impero is sitting in an Iranian port somewhere with a crew that isn't British, that is paid through a Scottish company that is actually operated by a Crete-based Greece LLC. Now, just as a way of looking at this, a ship is a business, folks. This is what it does. A ship is an investment. So you've got people that own it, that people have contributed some money to this thing, and its business is to travel around the world carrying stuff for people. Hey, you need something carried? We'll carry it for you for X amount of dollars. And just like the pirate ships of old or the whaling ships of Nantucket, that voyage is going to cost X amount of dollars. They've got to pay a crew. They've got to pay docking fees. They've got to buy fuel. They've got to pay for, any tolls if they go through canals or anything like that. And all of that comes out of the gross of the voyage. And then whatever's net left, the owners get to divide that up and go, look, we made some money. It's just a business, folks. That's all this is. There's this romanticizing, I guess, of this whole thing, but it's really just a business. Now, when you run a business, just as a general rule of thumb, would you rather have your business, in a place where you can pay less or pay more for certain costs, insurance costs, labor costs, labor liability costs, things like, workman's comp and that sort of thing. You want to keep those costs as cheap as you can. And you know that there are people around the world who will work for peanuts compared to people in some places. And so you register your ship in those places and ta-da, you don't have to pay those costs. You keep the costs down, the owners of the ship make more. There's also the issue of liability. Now, this is where it really gets weird if you think about the liability issues here. So, some years ago, the oil platform, I forget, the Deepwater Horizon. Remember this? Blows up, sinks, oil spills. Who was responsible for that? Anybody know? I mean, you might think to yourself, well, it was the oil companies. But the oil companies they might own it, but they don't operate it. So is it the operator? Is it the people that are actually operating the ship? Is it the owners of the ship? Is it the LLC that, provides insurance for the ship? And by the way, the Deepwater Horizon, even though it's a drill, is a ship. Is it the crew of the ship? Who is actually responsible for this? And that, by the way, was not flagged in the United States, which could explain a few things along the way. These flags of convenience are, as I said, a way of avoiding a lot of that liability. So now this tanker is sitting in this Iranian port. Who's liable for whatever happens to this? Let's say the Iranians get nuts and just start cutting people's heads off again, because that's what they do. Who's responsible for whatever happened? You could say, well, the Iranians would be. But again, it's a paramilitary organization, so the government's going to say, well, it's not our fault. We didn't do it. But financially, who's liable? Who's going to compensate these families for that? And so it becomes very murky, and it's intentionally so. This is what you need to understand. It's intended to be this way. It is very difficult. You want to have some fun? Just go look up that tanker online. There are websites that will give you information about tankers, and you'll notice that a lot of that information is either weird or incomplete or just flat out locked out. You can't get into it. It's bizarre, but it's intended to be that way. Excuse me. They do that on purpose to confuse the liability of this, to confuse the whole operation of it. And then the news gets on the news and your newspaper and your radio and your talking heads, and they all get on there and this British flag tanker was seized by Iran. Okay, was it? Was it really? The first thing that goes through my head when I hear some country flagged ship is, okay, whose is it really? And really, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the cargo? Are we talking about the crew? Are we talking about the liability? What are we actually talking about? We don't know. Nobody knows. In the case of this particular, the Sterno Bulk company, it's Swedish. The Swedes own this thing. But you barely hear that mentioned at all. You barely hear it mentioned that it's operated by Crete and Scotland and that the crew isn't even British. Why is Britain coming unglued over this and sending naval units down to the Persian Gulf, submarine, a destroyer, all this stuff to rattle the cage of the Iranians because you seized our ship? Or did they? When people start talking about false flag operations, intended to create, chaos and intended to create wars and lead us into wars and that sort of things. I don't know that it's necessarily a false flag operation. I don't know that it's necessarily somebody going out of their way to intentionally try to create a scenario. But by the very nature of flagging and flags of convenience, we have created a scenario, a business scenario where, okay, sure, it's cheap to ship stuff, and that's what we want. We want cheap shipping, don't we? If we had to pay what it would cost an American company to ship stuff from China over here, do you realize what would happen to your cost of living? But if we flag it through, I don't know, Liberia, because that's what we do, it's going to be a whole lot cheaper and it's going to be a whole lot easier to do. And so that's what the United States does. We flag our ships primarily through Liberia, which is kind of cool because their flag almost looks like ours and from a distance could be taken for ours. Or we flag them through Panama, which is a tradition of ours going back to the Prohibition era. Most of our tankers we flag through Panama. Most of our other kinds of ships, cargo, whatever, we'll flag through there. But we've created this situation where it's not necessarily a false flag operation, but it is an operation that has created all kinds of confusion, hasn't it? And in the process of this, very dangerous confusion, because now, like I said, the Brits are sending atomic-powered warships, submarine, and other types of ships to the Persian Gulf to create a confrontation with Iran, which, again, they haven't done it yet, but they're going to, is going to deny that they ever did this. It's a paramilitary group. It's not us. It's like the students that took the embassy. It's not really us. I mean, we're okay with them doing it, but we're not responsible. It's not, we didn't do it. It's those guys over there. You need to talk to them. I mean, us? No. The United States, of course, with John Bolton and the like, itching for a war with Iran. This is an excuse for that. This is an excuse for this whole thing. But there are a couple of factors here that nobody is talking about. Nobody, even as we sit here and we talk about the Stena Impero, owned by Stena Bulk, sitting in this Iranian port with this non-British crew and Sweden issuing this Swedish company issuing press releases left and right that nobody's reading, talking about how, we want our crew back. Nobody's talking about the Grace 1. Do you know what the Grace 1 is? Have you heard about the Grace 1? The Grace 1, by the way, is a Panamanian registered freighter. It is Panamanian flagged. Its ownership is a little more, it's the word I'm looking for here. It's a little more murky, but it is operated by iShips Management, which is in Singapore. So where the Steno is Crete, this one is Singapore. The crew is, who knows what the crew is, I don't. But as a general rule of thumb, what you need to understand is that the Grace 1 is apparently claimed by Iran as ownership. That at least the cargo is claimed by Iran. And the Grace 1 for the last month and a half has been sitting in Gibraltar because the British seized it because it was in violation, the cargo was in violation of the embargo against Iran. So that tanker is sitting in Gibraltar. Again, Panamanian flag, Singapore operated. Who knows what the crew is? Everything else is a little murky about the Grace 1. I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm just saying it's intentionally murky. While shortly thereafter, the Impero is seized by Iran, probably because a paramilitary group with some government wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know what I mean, sanctioning, wanted that oil. And so the British flag gives them the impetus to say, well, you took ours, so we're going to take yours. And now the entire world is holding its breath over a couple of ships that we keep forgetting about, one that nobody really understands what's going on with. That's the amazing part of all this, is that, again, you watch the news today, they're going to talk about this British ship. The British government is upset. The new prime minister is having cabinet meetings right now to talk about what they're going to do with Iran. What's going on? And very little of it has anything to do with the UK at all, except they've got some advantageous laws in Scotland that let the owner-operators of this ship cut costs and run through the Straits of Hormuz unprotected, risking those men's and women's lives for a few extra pennies or dollars or pounds or euros or whatever. Is that the question that I have in all of this? Is that worth going to war over? I mean, understand that if we go to war with Iran over the Steno bulk tanker Impero, Iran is going to be wiped off the map. I mean, this is what the president said. We're going to wipe you off the map. Great. But Iran is going to they're not even going to bother fighting us. They're not even going to try to fight us. They're going to instantaneously attack Israel, which, at last check, neither flagged nor owned any of the tankers involved in this whole mess. None of them. So the question you wind up asking yourself, and again, I've said this before, I'm the hawk. I'm the guy that does not trust the mad mullahs of Teheran. I just don't. I'm also a little more circumspect about things. I understand how uranium is enriched and what it takes to get to where we want. I don't doubt that they're trying to develop nuclear weapons. But at the same time, I'm not convinced necessarily that they're there. They do have missiles. They do probably have chemical and biological weapons, and they've said point blank they're going to go after Israel. So my question to you today, and maybe you can tell me the answer is yes, maybe you can tell me it's no, I don't know, is a British flag, Chinese built, Scottish operated, Cretan licensed tanker with non-British crew and a Panamanian tanker operated by Singapore with who knows what crew. Is that really worth all this? Is that really worth going to war with Iran? I don't think it is. But maybe you do. But shouldn't we be at least understanding what it is that we're talking about? It's not a British ship, folks. It never was. It's not even close. Nor is the Grace 1 an Iranian ship. We need to understand what's going on before we start shooting at each other. What do you think? That's where I'm at. I got to get going. Take the time right now. Tell the people that matter in your life you love them very much. You'd miss them if they weren't there, so don't pass up those opportunities. You don't want to have that regret. Plausibly Live, I'm Dave Bowman. This is my show, The Dave Bowman Show, right here on the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. See you tomorrow, everybody. Have a great day.
The Dave Bowman Show is a Slippery Fish Entertainment production for the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. For more information or to complain about how the show offended you, the text or voicemail number is 209-565-DAVE. For more information about the show, log on to thedavebowmanshow.com.
Hey, I'm going to go do something productive. I'm going to go watch television.